Hello. Thanks so much for taking time to watch our session today. My name is Kenneth Jackson. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect here in the Global Financial Services Group at AWS. And I'm very pleased to have Broadridge here sharing their story about how they are transforming the architecture of one of their critical applications, Broadridge Advisor Solutions, and the benefit that that transformation will bring to their customers. We're going to start by having Deepak Elias talk about the guiding principles or tenets that led to this architectural change. Leon Sklar will then come on and talk about the architecture, the BAS architecture pre-transformation and the microservices architecture they're moving toward. And we'll finish up by talking about how this architectural transformation benefits not only this application, but how patterns from this transformation can be harvested and applied to other applications. And we'll finish up with some lessons learned from a variety of perspectives. So now I'd like to hand it over to Deepak to start us off.
Hey everybody, my name is Deepak Elias. I lead the Enterprise Cloud Architecture team here at Broadridge. Thank you for having me. I want to talk a little bit about the enterprise architecture tenets that we've set up to actually help with transformation of applications like we're going to talk about today for Broadridge Advisor Solutions, and also talk about how to leverage this to create patterns and reusability for application modernization at an enterprise level. First, let me introduce Broadridge. Broadridge started in 1962 as a brokerage services division within ADP. In 2007, it spun off in its own company, and today is a $4.5 billion company that it acts as a transformative partner to many financial services and insurance companies. We primarily focus on enriching client engagement by navigating risk, optimizing their businesses for efficiency, and generating revenue growth. Some of the capabilities that Broadridge provides is in the world of communications. In fact, 80% of the households in North America gets communications that's actually printed on Broadridge paper. Firms also trust Broadridge to process, on an average, more than $10 trillion worth of fixed income and equity trades every day. Broadridge also enables customers in their multi-asset post-trade processing in over 100 countries and delivers communications in over 90 countries. Let's talk a little bit about how we're trying to simplify technology for our customers. Technology is ever-changing and it's relatively complex, only because of the amount of services out there and the kinds of capabilities that exist that's effectively democratized right now. What we've put in place is a strategy to help our customers accept as well as leverage that technology, not only through our products, but also through their capabilities as well. We've simplified that into four primary cases: AI and ML, blockchain, cloud, and digital. And we call this the ABCDs of innovation. This is how we transform our technology and explain it and deliver it to our customers. But underlying all of that, and what you'll see today, are some of the enterprise architecture tenets that we've put in place that drive the kinds of transformation, repeatability, and value for our customers, similar to what we've done with our Broadridge Advisor Solutions. I want to start off with security and compliance. That's number one. Everybody focuses on security and compliance. Data is always considered confidential at a minimal level. That means we build in things like encryption, TLS, into our core infrastructure modules that people use every day to build their architectures. We're moving from a project focus to a migration factory. And what that means is, as we have plenty of applications, similar to Broadridge Advisor Solutions, which you're going to be looking at in a few minutes, as these applications migrate and modernize, we're extracting capabilities from within that to create a migration factory in order so that we can leverage the learnings, the speed, and the quality in the next application that goes to the cloud. We also want to make these architectures discoverable. That means other people should be able to use it, not only just the actual architecture, but the patterns from it. How do we extract authorization capabilities of the wonderful work that the Broadridge Advisor Solution did? Or the Elasticsearch capability that exists within that, or even leveraging of strangler patterns or serverless or container patterns. Now, as we do that, we want to measure these architectures. We want to be able to validate that they not only meet our standards, but also deliver the kinds of performance, security, operation, and resiliency that we want to have them put in place. In order for us to be a true fintech provider, which is what Broadridge is, we have to also be able to share data and services across the different applications and businesses. And our tenet that we're going after there is via APIs. This lets us build a better platform of applications and services, but more importantly, create the kinds of business outcomes that our customers want. They want to be able to combine capabilities across our different platforms, across our different pieces of data, and bring that to market more quickly and more easily so that they can gain benefit from it much faster. Here are some of the tenets that we have put in place, and here are some of the tenets that actually drove the transformation that we're talking about today of a monolith to microservices in the Broadridge Advisor solutions. Now, to take us through that solution, I'm going to invite my colleague, Leon, to step up.
Thank you, Deepak. Hi, my name is Leon Shklar, and I lead application development for Broadridge Advisory Solutions. And let me just say a few words about what you see on the slide here. On the left hand of the slide is where we're starting from. We have 4 groups of applications, very different hosting solutions, different technology stacks, different functions that they perform. And at some point, it becomes really difficult to continue to make progress when you're dealing with 4 different technology stacks. Some of them are modern, some of them are not. And they range from Cold Fusion to .NET to Scala, and they are hosted on-prem and on AWS. This is not the kind of situation that allows us to continue to progress as rapidly as we want and as the company want us to and as our customers want us to. So what do? How do we approach it? We look at those 4 applications and we notice that there is incredible amount of redundancy between those applications functionally. They've been built at different times. They are all different solutions. They all ingest data. They all index in some way or form and make it available to customers through different applications. Okay, what do? Instead of integrating applications one by one, merging them together, which becomes really intractable at some point, we had to find a solution that will work and that would allow us to support some sort of a gradual transition, getting to a better world one step at a time, while reaping the benefits of intermediate results. So how do we do that? And the solution that we came up with, which maps to the general architectural principles that Deepak just delineated, was to design and implement a microservice platform, and then slowly get into a scenario where we migrate a functionality on the 4 different apps at different times. It doesn't have to be synced. It doesn't have to happen at the same time. It can happen absolutely asynchronously. But let's say we start supporting ingesting content into microservices platform and then exposing it through APIs. All right, so our 4 apps are going to start using those web services, and then the code that is doing it as part of the monolithic app will go dead and then eventually be retired. Looking forward, applications will become very thin UI layers. So what were the main principles that we had to follow designing this platform? And what did we have in mind? What was the vision? We wanted to build services that would be available to all Broadridge applications, not just BAS, not just our group of apps. We want everyone to benefit from that, and then potentially make it possible for other groups to contribute to the same platform once it's in existence. The services, once made available, would make it possible then to create a common front-end platform We want it to be based on React. We already have React applications, but if you look across the board, there is pretty much everything there: React, Angular, Vue. We want to have reusable React components, and that's pretty much what we're standardizing on. And then, as I was noting, as we making progress with releasing new services on our microservice platform, our legacy applications become thin. Functional redundancy goes away because, all right, if all the 4 applications can ingest content and index it using different technologies, not anymore. They're just going to be calling common services, and then the problem goes away. And then it's not only the content; it's the repository of prospect and advisor profiles. It's a repository of all kinds of content, both Broadridge and third party, with additional improvements such as tagging and search enhancements. And this repository of content is powered by Elastic Indexing. So here is how this platform that we have put together already, it's actually functioning, is looking like at a very high level. So what do we have? We had to come up with a solution that would allow us to deliver useful results real soon. Because the one thing that doesn't work very well is a big bang. Doesn't help to go into a scenario for a year when nothing is coming out, and then services finally come out and you don't know if they are the right services or the wrong services, if people are using it beneficially or not. How do we make immediate results available? And as a matter of fact, we achieved very rapid delivery of those results. How did we do it? Well, the first thing that we decided was to make things simple and to start off with using Cognito to only support application identities. We decided not to manage end-user identities within the platform to get started. Eventually we will. That is absolutely important, and that's absolutely something that we will do, but not on day one. On day one, the applications have their identities. They're responsible for identifying users, for authorizing user requests, and then passing us the user identities to the platform. And the requests that come through API Gateway already have user information, but the only validation that's happening at the platform level is validation of the application identity. Then what happens? We have requests coming in. The requests go to be processed through the Elastic Index, or some of the processing of some of the requests through the APIs may require us submitting a request to Aurora, where the metadata is stored. But what you don't see, of course, is that there is an asynchronous process for populating the Elastic Index and the RDS. And there are feeds that are being processed. There is content that is being populated. The platform doesn't store the content. What it does store, it stores the indexes so that the APIs for finding and retrieving content can be powered properly. And that's really how the platform operates. Now, the very first set of services that we released were services for ingesting and indexing video content. That content is actually stored in the S3 buckets, and it's cached, and there is CloudFront that is being used for that. But the metadata, once again, is being indexed. It's populated into Elastic Index and stored in Amazon Aurora. And we power the search requests, and then the retrieval requests are going to go and retrieve from the S3 bucket. But that was the first set of services. The next set of services was to support the ingestion of textual content, which we index and populate, and then make it available through the APIs for search requests. So what I'd like to do now is pass it on back to Deepak so that he can comment on the architectural patterns that we followed in building this application and how they can be reused throughout the organization.
So Leon did a great job of actually talking about how this architecture came together, and he mentioned a few key things that I'd like to take us back to from the architectural tenets. He talked about APIs, he talked about data, he talked about using repeatable patterns that are available to us using AWS Cloud Native Services as well as enterprises that we actually have to scale. So when we looked at his application, what we did was look for specific areas that other applications, as they modernize and move away from either their legacy code or just create new technologies or products for our customers, that they can leverage quickly and easily in order to get the kind of speed that he gained while achieving the same level of quality and security that he actually put into those patterns. So if we take his architecture diagram here, you'll start seeing certain areas that you can identify and extract for other applications to use. For example, right now I'm showing you the auth-n and auth-z pattern that they put in place that we extracted and are now trying to leverage across the board for some of our other applications. What's important about these patterns is creating the repeatability so that we can speed up the next set of applications that are going through it. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that these are a one-size-fits-all. There will always be updates that needs to happen and maintenance that needs to go into this to kind of extend it. Leon talked about the fact that today we're using Cognito and tomorrow we might need to set up some user identity management capability extending that. We also extracted the index and search pattern that was built into his system so that in the future, if somebody wanted to actually store their data and index and search it, they could leverage the Amazon Aurora database for metadata as well as Amazon Elasticsearch to actually go ahead and look that up. What's interesting here is we also built into the original design of these applications some of the resiliency, some of the performance, and some of the security and operational attributes required to achieve the enterprise grade level capability that the Broadridge Advisor Solution application had to have. And these patterns leveraged that and inherited it. The last pattern that we want to talk about is actually the distribution of that actual data. And we leveraged Amazon CloudFront and Lambda at Edge for some of the authorization capability. And this was extracted using the Broadridge Advisor Solution for somebody else to use. So the next application that comes in, if they're going monolith or whatever they might be doing, if they're creating microservices, they've already got serverless in here because we're leveraging things like Lambda at Edge, we're leveraging CloudFront. We've got a pattern to actually store data. We've got a pattern to expose APIs. We've got a pattern to run server container applications. And the beauty about it is all of this is reusable because we extracted it out from the application and kept it ready to use. We're essentially building, for lack of a better word, a solution catalog of a kind that every other application can come in and actually use. And all of that is based on the original tenets that I described earlier. So let's talk a little bit about some of the enterprises, the enterprise perspective in lessons learned. And we'll go through an application view as well, which Leon will talk about in a few minutes. First and foremost, we need to identify from an enterprise perspective when we're modernizing an application that it is true modernization. As Leon talked about, it isn't a case of just lifting and shifting. What are we doing to create microservices? But more importantly, not simple code, but rather reusable code. What Leon did was create a reusable video upload service. And that is a reusable capability that isn't just a reusable pattern from a deployment of containers or serverless or CloudFront or things like that, but an actual service that can store video data that can be used across Broadridge. We want to test and build automation that's actually critical for the successful delivery of these applications. And keeping all this in mind, we have to focus on what the business goals are that deliver the ultimate metrics of what our success actually is. As part of this, through this journey, we have to consider and implement doing well-architected reviews in order to identify some of our design gaps. And I think this is actually vitally important. It's been very useful for us to qualify and validate the patterns coming out using the well-architected framework. It is time-consuming to do, so we choose our workloads carefully when we actually do the well-architected framework, but it's extremely valuable in actually making sure that we're identifying the gaps, especially from a design perspective. It used to be an either-or between serverless and containers, and we've found with this great example with Broadridge Advisor Solutions that we can use both of them together. Now, the interesting part here is this is actually a repeatable learning experience across the Broadridge enterprise, where it used to be the camp of containers or the camp of serverless, but using them together actually makes a lot of sense, as shown in the architecture. And then last but not the least, if you're an enterprise customer like Broadridge is, you have DevOps, at least continuous deployment. You have infrastructure as code. You've built a platform, ideally, that is leveraged as a landing zone where you can automate what it is, the architectures you're actually building. One of the most important lessons we learned here is identifying the knowledge and the knowledge gap among the development teams as needed early, so that they can develop the actual capability of the architectures quickly and with as much level of detail as needed. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Leon to talk a little bit about the architectural perspective.
So going back to the application, as we mentioned earlier on this presentation, Deepak actually mentioned that we're leveraging the strangler pattern. And the strangler pattern is very important to us in this case because we want to transition away from the 4 different application stacks, the 4 different technology stacks, 4 different application groups, but we want to do it gradually. We want to do it gradually, and we want to benefit from all the intermediate deployments, from all the intermediate results that occur. How do we do that? And I just want to be a little redundant and point back to what we did with deciding to defer the identity management component and to use Cognito in the beginning to only manage application identities. That allowed us to make our microservices available real fast. You know, it is a pretty fast result that we started our development back in December 2020, and we deployed our services to benefit our customers in April. And that pretty much including everything, including CI/CD pipeline and the infrastructure code and the application. That was the original deployment, and we since deployed many other services that benefit our customers already. One thing to note, one thing that we definitely learned is before we start implementation in earnest, we need to experiment and test. That is a very positive lesson that we learned. When we started, we knew that we want to use serverless. That's the most beneficial and effective way to manage our costs. But at the same time, we weren't really sure that overuse of Lambda functions is going to work for us, and it didn't. We compared Lambda functions against Fargate, and we chose to move forward with Fargate. We're still using Lambda Edge, and that's appropriate where it is, but the Fargate containers worked a lot better for us, and for a variety of reasons, which are somewhat application specific. But it allows for very smooth auto scaling and really allows for very graceful management of changing load. We identified non-functional requirements early, and non-functional requirements were something that I just mentioned. For example, the gradual, graceful management of the load, and the considerations such as performance, security, cost, and resilience. The one thing to mention in all of this, that different teams at Broadridge and at AWS work together, and that was a major driver of success. that is experience that is extremely positive, and I want to thank all the team members from AWS and from Deepak's architecture team who helped us make this a successful exercise. And with that, I want to pass it back to Ken.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Deepak. We really appreciate you taking time to prepare this talk and come in and deliver it, to share the wisdom you've learned the hard way, the only way to learn it in the real world, and to share that with our customers. In wrapping up, I want to speak to our customers from the AWS perspective, but also speak to my colleagues around the world, the solutions architects and TAMs and account managers, consultants who show up every day to serve their customers. So I would encourage both parties, both the customer and my colleagues, to really dive deep. So for customers, that means share deeply, as Broadridge did. They're very clear in what they're trying to achieve, both from that enterprise perspective, right? This change in approach, change in culture that they're trying to achieve, and how they were trying to do that in the context of a very specific application, Broadridge Advisor Solutions. So that's, trust is earned, and so I would encourage again customers to step out in faith, trust your account team, make them part of the team, invite them to daily stand-ups. That was a clear benefit. We were just part of the team. Even though we weren't there, we didn't have necessarily access to all the tools, but we were treated as members of the team, which allowed us to help share in Broadridge achieving the success that has been described here. I also encourage my account teams and encourage customers to encourage AWS to bring all the resources to bear that we have, even beyond the account team. I lead a team of solutions architects tasked with helping customers move faster by prototyping. Leon's team had this hypothesis. There was some functionality they wanted to add to the application to use machine learning to help improve the recommendations of content. So you saw on the architecture slide this pattern of ingesting content that was available to advisors, but how do I recommend? If the advisor doesn't search exactly for the way that I expect, how do I recommend content that's likely to be relevant to that advisor and to her customers? Well, machine learning can help, but they had this idea. It didn't really fit in their sprint cycle, but we brought the prototyping team to bear to say, hey, can we quickly prove that it will work, and then get that functionality in? And we were able to pull that functionality up a few sprints by leveraging other resources and thinking creatively. Finally, I would just close by saying, we say a lot at AWS. There's no compression algorithm for experience, and I would encourage both customers and my colleagues to try experiments. Most of them are two-way doors. Most of them, we can try, we can fail fast, we can learn, and we can move on. If that's done in a spirit of partnership, if that's done with deep understanding of what our customers are trying to achieve, then I think that the risk you take in trusting the account team, the risk you take in having experiments that you don't know the outcome for will pay off. And I hope this has been a great example of that at Broadridge. So finally, thank you. You've taken time to make it to the end of our session. We know time is precious, and we appreciate it. We'd love any feedback that you have, and we'd love to know how we can make this session and others like it better.